Emily Patterson had spent 3 years perfecting the art of invisibility. Behind the reception desk of Riverside Inn, she was just another face in a blue uniform, polite, efficient, forgettable. No one knew that the woman who apologized for the broken ice machine controlled a $2.3 billion hotel empire. No one knew she could buy the building with pocket change. And no one knew that the simple life she'd built was about to shatter in the worst possible way. Not because of her wealth, but because of something far more dangerous: love found in all the wrong places.
Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing.
The morning shift at Riverside Inn always started the same way. Emily arrived at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her official start time, because that's what responsible employees did. She changed into her uniform in the staff bathroom, carefully tucking away the Cartier watch her mother had given her for her 25th birthday, a watch worth more than most people's cars. In its place, she strapped on a simple Timex she'd bought at a drugstore for $19. Emily Carter, as her name tag read, was a woman who took the bus to work. Emily Patterson, whose name appeared on Forbes lists, had a driver waiting in a different part of the city, wondering why his employer insisted on these strange absences. 3 years ago, when her father died and left her everything, Emily had made a decision that shocked her family's lawyers, accountants, and especially her mother. She would continue running Patterson Hotels Group, the empire her grandfather had built and her father had expanded, but she would do it remotely, through trusted executives and video conferences. The rest of her time she would spend living as someone else. Not because she was ashamed of her wealth, not because she wanted to abandon her responsibilities, but because Emily Patterson had spent 29 years watching people's faces change the moment they learned her last name. She'd watched genuine smiles turn calculated. She'd felt conversations shift from authentic to transactional. She dated men who loved the idea of her more than the reality, who saw her as a trophy or a ticket to a better life. Emily wanted to know what it felt like to be ordinary, to have someone look at her and see just her, not dollar signs, not opportunity, not access to a world of luxury and privilege. So she became Emily Carter, and she was good at it. She had rented a modest one-bedroom apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. She'd learned to budget her receptionist's salary, even though she didn't need to. She had discovered the satisfaction of earning a paycheck through her own labor, separate from the fortune she'd inherited. She had made friends who invited her to potluck dinners and complained about rent increases and talked about their dreams, without the weight of already achieved success crushing the conversation. For 3 years, it had worked perfectly. Until James. James Morrison had checked into room 314 3 weeks ago, with 2 suitcases, a tired smile, and an apology for the inconvenience. His apartment building was undergoing emergency plumbing repairs, something about corroded pipes and potential flooding, and his landlord had given residents 2 weeks' notice to vacate temporarily. The repairs had already stretched into week 3, and James had extended his stay twice. Emily had processed his extensions with professional efficiency, but something about James caught her attention. Maybe it was the way he thanked the housekeeping staff by name. Maybe it was how he apologized for accidentally tracking in mud from the rain, trying to clean it himself before the maintenance crew arrived. Maybe it was simply the genuine warmth in his eyes when he smiled. Over the following weeks, Emily learned that James taught 11th grade English at Roosevelt High School. He loved his job despite the modest salary, the bureaucratic frustrations, and the fact that half his students didn't read the assigned books. He believed that the right story could change someone's life, could open doors they didn't know existed. He'd stop by the reception desk in the mornings before heading to school, sometimes bringing an extra coffee, not flirtatiously, just kindly, the way someone might share extra cookies they'd baked. They'd talk for a few minutes about his lesson plans, about the student who'd finally understood The Great Gatsby, about the school board meeting that had kept him up late preparing arguments for better library funding. James never asked Emily about her life in the way that felt like interrogation. He didn't pry into her background or her ambitions with that calculating interest she'd learned to recognize. Instead, he shared pieces of his own life and left space for her to share hers if she wanted to. Emily found herself looking forward to those morning conversations. She found herself thinking about James during slow moments at the desk, wondering what he was teaching that day, hoping his difficult third-period class was behaving. She found herself, and this was the terrifying part, developing feelings. Real feelings. The kind she hadn't allowed herself in years. 2 weeks ago, James had lingered at the desk longer than usual, shifting his weight from foot to foot with uncharacteristic nervousness. So he'd started, then stopped. Tried again. I know this is probably against some kind of hotel policy, and if it is, please forget I said anything and we can pretend this never happened. Emily's heart had started beating faster. But I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me sometime. Not here, not at the hotel. There's this burger place about 3 blocks away that makes their own pickles, and I know that sounds like a weird selling point, but they're really good pickles. Emily had felt joy and terror in equal measure. This was what she'd wanted, someone who saw Emily Carter and liked what he saw. But it was also what she'd feared, the inevitable moment when her carefully constructed world would have to confront reality. I'd love to, she'd heard herself say. James's face had transformed with relief and happiness. Really? That's great. Tonight? After your shift? Tonight is perfect. And now it was 4:30 p.m. on that promised evening. 90 minutes before her shift ended. And Emily was beginning to understand what people meant when they said they had butterflies in their stomach. She felt like she'd swallowed an entire terrarium. The lobby was moderately busy with check-ins and check-outs, the usual afternoon rush. Emily processed guests with practiced efficiency, her hands moving through the familiar motions while her mind spun through dozens of scenarios. Should she tell James the truth tonight? Should she wait until they'd had a few dates? Should she ever tell him at all? That last thought made her stomach twist with guilt. She couldn't build something real on a foundation of lies. But she also couldn't bear the thought of seeing James's expression change when he learned who she really was. The calculation entering his eyes, the subtle shift in how he related to her. The lobby doors opened with their characteristic whoosh, and Emily glanced up automatically to greet the newcomer. Her blood turned to ice. Richard Chen, her family's personal assistant and business manager, strode through the doors with his unmistakable, purposeful walk. He wore one of his perfectly tailored gray suits, carried his leather messenger bag, and had the expression he always wore when dealing with urgent business matters. Emily felt the world tilt.
Richard should not be here. Richard knew about her double life. He was one of 3 people who did, but they had strict protocols. He never contacted Emily Carter. All communication went through encrypted channels to Emily Patterson's private email and phone, devices she kept hidden in her apartment. They never, ever overlapped worlds. If Richard was here, something was catastrophically wrong. Emily watched in slow-motion horror as Richard approached the desk. She tried to catch his eye, to signal him somehow, but he was focused on the papers in his hand. Around her, the lobby continued its normal rhythm, guests chatting, luggage wheels rolling across marble, the elevator dinging in the background. "Ms. Patterson," Richard said in his crisp, professional tone, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I apologize for the interruption, but we have an urgent situation that requires your immediate attention." The world didn't just tilt, it stopped. Emily's coworker, Marcus, who was processing a checkout 3 feet away, turned his head sharply. 2 guests waiting near the desk looked up with sudden interest, and James, who had been sitting in a lobby seating area reading a book, his head jerked up at the name Patterson. Emily's throat closed. Her carefully constructed life began crumbling in real time. "I think you have the wrong person," she managed to say, her voice barely steady. "My name is Emily Carter."
Richard's eyebrows drew together in confusion. Then his eyes widened slightly as he processed the uniform, the name tag, the setting. Emily saw the exact moment he understood his catastrophic mistake, but the damage was already done. Started Richard, then stopped. He was too smart, too experienced to make it worse with more words. My apologies, wrong person. But he didn't leave. Instead, he glanced at the papers in his hand with genuine distress. Whatever crisis had brought him here wasn't going to disappear just because he'd blown Emily's cover. Marcus was staring now, his face showing confusion and dawning suspicion. The guests were whispering to each other, and James had stood up from the sofa, his book forgotten, his expression showing the first edges of understanding. Emily had exactly 3 seconds to make a choice: deny everything and watch her relationship with James die from deception, or admit the truth and watch it die from betrayal. Either way, the life she'd built as Emily Carter was over.
Emily made her decision. "Marcus," she said quietly to her coworker, her voice steadier than she felt, "can you cover the desk for a few minutes? I need to handle something." Marcus, still looking confused, nodded slowly. "Yeah, sure. Everything okay?" "Not really, no." Emily stepped out from behind the desk on trembling legs. She looked at Richard, then at James, who was now walking toward them, then back at Richard. The lobby suddenly felt too small, too exposed, too full of witnesses to her unraveling. "Follow me," she said to both men, her voice leaving no room for argument. She led them toward the manager's office behind the reception area, a small, private room where the assistant manager handled paperwork and made phone calls. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. The three of them filed inside, and Emily closed the door on the curious stares and whispered speculation beginning to bubble in the lobby. The silence in the small office was deafening. James spoke first, his voice carefully controlled. "Emily, what's going on? Who's Miss Patterson?" Emily looked at this man who'd asked her to dinner, who'd brought her coffee, who'd talked to her about books and teaching in dreams without any pretense. She looked at Richard, who was studying his shoes with visible regret for his catastrophic error, and she made the choice to tell the truth. All of it. "My name is Emily Patterson. I own Patterson Hotels Group. We operate 47 luxury properties across the country, with a total valuation of approximately $2.3 billion. I've been working here under a simplified name for the past 3 years because I wanted to know what it felt like to be treated like a normal person." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples that would spread and spread. Emily's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, hurt, and finally a kind of shell-shocked understanding. You're a billionaire?" "Yes. And you've been pretending to be a receptionist?" "I haven't been pretending. I am a receptionist. I work here. I earn my paycheck, I take the bus and budget my money, and live in a regular apartment. This life is real." "But it's built on a lie," James said, and there was pain in his voice now. "Everything you've told me has been true." Emily interrupted. "My feelings, my thoughts, my values, those are all real. The only thing I didn't tell you was my net worth." "The only thing?" James' laugh was bitter. "That's not a small detail, Emily. That's not like forgetting to mention you have a cat. You're a billionaire who let me think you needed to work a reception desk to pay rent. You let me worry about whether I could afford to take you to a nice enough restaurant. You let me feel like we were on the same level when we're not even in the same universe." Richard cleared his throat awkwardly. "I truly apologize for the situation. If I may." "Not now," Emily and James said simultaneously. Richard fell silent, looking miserable. Emily stepped closer to James, her hands trembling. "I know this is a lot to process. I know you feel deceived, and you have every right to be angry. But please understand, every conversation we had, every moment we shared, that was me, the real me, not the version that people see when they know about the money." "How would you know?" James asked, his voice cracking slightly. You never gave anyone the chance to see both versions. You never trusted anyone enough to be honest. The accusation hit harder than Emily expected, because he was right. You're correct, she admitted. I didn't trust people. I'd spent my entire life watching people change when they learned who I was. Friends who suddenly needed loans. Boyfriends who wanted access to my world more than they wanted me. Strangers who saw me as an opportunity rather than a person. So you lied instead. I omitted. There's a difference. Is there? James looked at her with those intelligent, thoughtful eyes that had first attracted her. When you let someone believe a false narrative about who you are, when you build a relationship on that false narrative, that's not omission. That's deception. Emily felt tears pricking her eyes, but refused to let them fall. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, but please believe me when I say that my feelings for you are real. When I said yes to dinner tonight, it was because I genuinely wanted to spend time with you, not because of anything you could give me, because I already have everything material I could need, but because you made me laugh, because you see beauty in teaching kids about literature, because you make your hotel bed even though housekeeping will remake it, because you're kind and thoughtful and real. James stood very still, processing. Then he looked at Richard. Is that true? Is she really who she says she is? Richard nodded gravely. Miss Patterson is the sole owner and CEO of Patterson Hotels Group. She inherited the business from her father 3 years ago. Everything she's told you about her identity is accurate. But not about her life, not about anything that matters. Before Emily could respond, Richard's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it and his face went pale. Miss Patterson, I'm sorry, but it's 5:15. We have 45 minutes to respond to the Meadowbrook sellers, or we lose the $180 million. That's also 200 jobs in a town that desperately needs them. Emily felt trapped between two collapsing worlds. James was staring at her like she'd transformed into a stranger. Richard was holding out his phone with visible urgency. And she was supposed to be Emily Carter, worrying about shift changes, not Emily Patterson making 9-figure business decisions. I need to handle this, she said to James, her voice apologetic but firm. I'm sorry, but 200 people's livelihoods depend on this decision. Of course they do, James said, and there was something in his tone that made Emily's stomach knot. Because you're actually a CEO worried about making rent. You're a CEO who plays dress-up in your free time. The words stung because they echoed her deepest fear, that her quest for authenticity had itself been inauthentic, a wealthy person's luxury to pretend at normal life. James, please, handle your business, Miss Patterson, James said, and the formality of it felt like a wall slamming down between them. He left before Emily could respond, the door closing with a soft click that felt louder than a slam. Emily stood frozen for a moment, torn between running after him and handling the crisis that had brought her two worlds crashing together. Richard's expression was sympathetic but insistent. Show me what we're dealing with, Emily said finally, her voice hollow. Richard pulled out his tablet and brought up the documents. The Meadowbrook situation was dire. The property, a historic hotel in Vermont with pristine lake views, had been in negotiations for 6 months. The sellers, a family who'd owned the property for 3 generations, were being pressured by a competing offer from Meridian Corp., a development company known for demolishing historic properties and building soulless luxury condos.
They're offering $185 million, Richard explained. $5 million more than our offer, but they've also threatened the family. If they sell to us, Meridian will develop the adjacent land they own in ways that destroy the lake's natural beauty. That's extortion, Emily said, her business mind engaging despite her emotional turmoil. It's aggressive negotiation, and it's working. The family sent us an ultimatum: match Meridian's offer and provide guaranteed employment contracts for all current staff, or they're taking Meridian's deal at 6 p.m. today. Emily reviewed the financial projections quickly. The additional $5 million would stretch their quarterly budget and require shifting funds from other projects. But losing the property would mean watching it be destroyed and 200 people losing their jobs in a small town with limited opportunities. Match their offer, Emily decided. Pull funds from the Henderson expansion, but guarantee all Henderson staff 6 months' employment with full benefits. And draft generous employment contracts for every Meadowbrook employee, not just guaranteeing positions, but offering raises and improved benefits. That's another $3 million in first-year costs, Richard pointed out. I don't care. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. These people need to know they're valued, not just acquired. Richard nodded and began making calls, his fingers flying across his tablet. Emily helped finalize documents, authorize transfers, approve contract language. She was so focused that she almost forgot she was still wearing her Riverside Inn uniform, making multi-million-dollar decisions in a hotel manager's office while technically on the clock as a receptionist. 35 minutes later, everything was finalized and sent to the Meadowbrook family. Done, Richard said. They have everything. I'll follow up to confirm. After Richard left, Emily remained in the office, staring at the closed door. Her shift had ended 20 minutes ago. Marcus had undoubtedly noticed her extended absence. There would be questions tomorrow, speculation, whispers. Her carefully constructed normal life was crumbling. But first, she needed to face James. Emily changed out of her uniform and headed to the 3rd floor. The elevator ride felt both too quick and too slow. Her heart pounded as she approached room 314. She knocked softly. James, it's me. Silence stretched. Then, it's open. James sat in the armchair by the window, staring out at the city lights. He didn't turn when Emily entered. Did you save the deal? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Yes, 200 jobs protected. Congratulations. The word felt like a knife. Emily sat on the edge of the bed. James, please look at me. He did, and the hurt in his expression made my chest ache. I want to explain. You already did. You're rich. You wanted to feel normal. You lied about who you were. James' jaw tightened. What else is there? Everything. The whole story. Emily took a breath to explain 3 years of secrets, but James asked the one question she had never prepared for. Were you ever going to tell me, or was I just a fun experiment in how the other half lives?
Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The question hung in the air like an accusation. Emily felt it like a physical blow. That's not fair, she said quietly. Isn't it? James leaned forward. You're a billionaire playing receptionist. I'm a teacher who makes $52,000 a year and thought he was asking out someone in a similar situation. What happens at dinner tonight? Excuse me, we're going to go to dinner? I pick a place I can afford, which is probably a place you'd consider slumming? I would never, but that's my point. James stood up, pacing. You don't have to think about it at all. You can exist in my world whenever you want, like a tourist. But I can't exist in yours. We're not on the same playing field. Emily stood too. You're right about the inequality, but you're wrong about my intentions. I wasn't experimenting. I was trying to find something real. How can anything be real when it's built on a lie? Because the person I was with you, that was real. Emily Carter isn't a character I play. She's me without the burden of expectations. But you weren't born without those expectations. You were born Emily Patterson. That's part of who you are. Emily moved closer to him. Do you understand what it's like to never know if someone likes you for yourself? To have every relationship colored by money? To wonder if your friends would stick around if you lost everything? No, I don't, James admitted. But I can imagine what it's like to be deceived by someone you're starting to care about. They stood in tense silence. Then Emily made a decision. Let me tell you everything, the whole truth, and then you can decide if you still want to hate me. James studied her, then nodded slowly. Okay, tell me. Emily sat back down, gathering her thoughts. My full name is Emily Catherine Patterson. I'm 29 years old. My grandfather started Patterson Hotels with a single property in 1952. My father expanded it into what it is today. I grew up in Manhattan, private schools, summers in the Hamptons. On paper, I had everything. She paused, remembering. But my father worked constantly.
My mother cared more about charity galas than about me. I had tutors instead of parents. Friends whose parents made sure they befriended the Patterson heiress. Boyfriends who dated me for the access I provided. James listened silently. When I was 24, I got engaged to Philip Worthington. Old money, right pedigree. I thought I loved him. Emily's voice wavered. 3 weeks before the wedding, I overheard him tell his brother, "It doesn't matter if I'm attracted to her, I'm marrying the Patterson fortune, and that's hot enough." She saw anger flicker across James' face. I called off the wedding. My mother was furious, but I realized I had no idea if anyone actually cared about me as a person. Then my father died suddenly. Heart attack at 58. He left me everything. Emily wiped her eyes. At his funeral, hundreds of people showed up. Everyone praised what a great man he was. And I realized I barely knew him. He'd been so consumed with the business that we'd never just talked. "I'm sorry," James said, his voice softer. I inherited $2.3 billion and felt completely alone. So I decided to continue running the company remotely, but also create a parallel life where I could be someone without that weight. I wanted a real job, real work, real challenges that had nothing to do with being the boss. "That's noble," James said with an edge, "but you always had an escape hatch. That's the fundamental difference." "You're absolutely right, but the person you got to know, that's who I actually am. Not the society princess, not just the CEO, the woman who likes talking about books and finding meaning. That's me." James was quiet. Then, "What was your plan? Were you ever going to tell me?" "I don't know. I wanted to. I was terrified to. Maybe there isn't a right way. Maybe the right way was to be honest from the start. Then I never would have gotten to know you. You would have seen the money first." "That's a pretty low opinion of me." "It's realistic. People can't help it. The money changes everything." James walked to the window. "So what happens now?" "I don't expect you to just accept this, but I'm asking for a chance to prove my feelings are real." "How? How do I know this isn't just another version of the performance?" Emily stood. "Because I'm standing here having the most uncomfortable conversation of my life when I could just walk away. Because I saved 200 jobs today instead of maximizing profit. Because I've spent 3 years living a life I didn't have to live, trying to become someone better." James's expression softened fractionally, but doubt remained. "I want to believe you, but everything I thought I knew just got turned upside down. I need time." "I understand. Take all the time you need." She moved toward the door. As her hand touched the handle, James spoke again. "The dinner offer, the burgers and pickles, was that real for you?" Emily turned back. "It was the most real thing that's happened to me in 3 years." She left before he could respond, before she could see whether her words made any difference.
Emily returned to our apartment in a daze. The small space had been her sanctuary for 3 years. Tonight, it felt like a stage set for a play that had just closed. She sat on her second-hand couch and finally let herself cry, deep, wrenching sobs from a place of accumulated loneliness. She'd known this day would come eventually, but she'd hoped it would be on her terms, not through Richard's well-intentioned catastrophe. Her encrypted phone buzzed. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. Emily considered ignoring it, then answered. "Hello, Mother." "Emily, Richard informed me about today's incident." Victoria Patterson's voice was cool. "He said your cover was compromised at that little hotel where you've been playing pretend." "I wasn't playing pretend." "Well, this fantasy has gone on long enough. Come home. We have the Vanderbilt benefit next week and the board meeting the week after." "I never stopped my responsibilities. I closed the Meadowbrook deal today." "By throwing money at it, yes." Her mother's tone sharpened. "Emily, this receptionist charade was charming at first. A grief response, the therapist said, but 3 years is enough. You're 29. Start acting like the CEO you are."
I learned more about our employees in 3 years than I would have in 30 years of board meetings. And what good does that do? Empathy doesn't increase profits. No, but it makes better policy, better leadership. It makes us more than just a profit machine. It makes you look foolish. When this gets out, when people learn Emily Patterson has been working as a receptionist under a false name, the press will destroy you. Shareholders will question your judgment. Emily hadn't considered that angle. The business implications could be significant. Then I'll handle it. I'll control the narrative. Or you could simply stop, move back to your real apartment, resume your real life. This isn't an episode, Mother. This is my life. No, darling. Patterson Hotels is your life. Everything else is a distraction. After the call ended, Emily sat in darkness, her mother's words echoing. Was Victoria right? Had Emily's quest been nothing more than an extended tantrum? Her Emily Carter phone buzzed. Marcus. Hey, you okay? Things got weird. Want to talk? Emily stared at the message. Marcus was a good person. They'd grabbed coffee together dozens of times. But how much of their friendship would survive the truth? She typed, I'm okay. Thanks for covering. See you tomorrow. Another buzz. Her Patterson phone. An email from Richard. Meadowbrook finalized and press inquiry. Emily's stomach dropped. Miss Patterson, Meadowbrook deal closed successfully. But I received a call from Jennifer Martinez at Business Daily. She's heard rumors about Patterson's CEO working undercover at Budget Hotel. I'm asking for comment. I told her we don't respond to rumors, but she's persistent. We need a strategy. Richard. Emily's hands shook. Jennifer Martinez was a respected journalist known for thorough investigations. If she was already investigating, it was only a matter of time before her double life became public. She spent the night drafting press statements, each feeling faker than the last. How could she explain 3 years of deception without sounding crazy or condescending? At 3 a.m., exhausted, Emily finally fell asleep on her couch, both phones clutched in her hands. She woke to pounding on her door. Disoriented, Emily stumbled to answer it. James stood in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept either. How did you know where I live? Reception records, right. I told myself I wasn't going to come. I spent all night trying to convince myself this was unforgivable. Emily's heart sank. But I kept thinking about something you said, about wanting people to love all of who you are. And I realized I'm being a hypocrite. What do you mean? I teach The Great Gatsby every year. The whole book is about identity, about people creating versions of themselves. I help teenagers understand that humans are complex, that we contain multitudes. Well, the moment you turn out to be complicated, I write you off. Emily stepped back, gesturing him inside. James entered, looking around at the secondhand furniture, the small kitchen, the modest simplicity. This is really where you live? Yes. Rent is $1,400 a month, exactly 60% of my receptionist salary, the maximum recommended percentage. James picked up a worn book on the coffee table. You really do read. Why would I lie about that? I don't know what's real anymore. He set the book down. Emily, I came because I need to understand. When you talked to me these past 3 weeks, were you Emily Patterson humoring the simple teacher or genuinely engaged? Emily felt the weight of the question. I was genuinely engaged. James, I read your book recommendations. I've been trying to understand how you see the world. When you talked about that student understanding Gatsby, I was genuinely moved. Why? Because you care about things that matter. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're just trying to help kids think critically. That's beautiful. That's real in a way nothing in my usual life is. James looked out the window. I make $52,000 a year. I drive a 2012 Honda with a dent. I've never been to Europe. I worry about affording air conditioning repairs. I know. And it doesn't bother you? Why would it? James turned to face her. Emily, I have 47 fancy restaurants. I have jets available anytime. I have more expensive gifts than I know what to do with. What I don't have is someone who brings me coffee just because. Someone who gets excited about a student's breakthrough. Someone who sees me as a person first. But can that work? The inequality between us is massive. Every decision would be colored by it. Emily was about to answer when both phones started ringing simultaneously. Her mother on one, Richard on the other. But it was the sound of multiple cars pulling up outside that made them both move to the window. 3 news vans were parking across the street. Camera crews emerging. Jennifer Martinez had published her story.
Emily's stomach plummeted. Through the windows, she could see reporters gathering, cameras setting up, neighbors emerging to see what was happening. "What's going on?" James asked. Emily pulled up her news app with shaking hands. The headline made her breath catch. Billionaire CEO living double life as hotel receptionist. Emily Patterson's 3-year deception exposed. By Jennifer Martinez, Business Daily. Emily Patterson, 29, heiress to the Patterson Hotel's fortune and CEO of a $2.3 billion empire, has been working undercover as a receptionist at a budget hotel under the assumed name Emily Carter for the past 3 years, Business Daily has learned. The article detailed her dual existence with remarkable accuracy. Someone had talked, maybe another hotel employee, maybe someone from her business world. "Oh, God," Emily whispered. James read over her shoulder. "This is bad. This is catastrophic." Emily's phone buzzed constantly. Texts, calls, emails, her mother, Richard, board members, business partners. "My professional credibility is about to be destroyed." A knock on the door. Mrs. Chen from 4B. "Emily, honey, there are reporters asking about you. They're saying you're some kind of secret billionaire." Emily closed her eyes. The building knew her as Emily Carter, the quiet receptionist. Now they were learning she'd lied for 3 years. "Don't answer," James said quietly. "I have to face this eventually." "Not now. Not unprepared." He pulled out his phone. "Let me call my sister. She's a PR consultant." "Amy, it's James. I need help. It's complicated, but..." "You already saw the article?" "I'm with her now. Can you..." "Okay, thank you." He hung up. "She's on her way. She says don't talk to anyone, don't post anything, and definitely don't go outside." "James, you don't have to..." "Emily, I came here because despite everything, I wanted to give this a chance." He gestured at the window. "I'm not going to run the first time things get difficult." Emily felt tears threatening. "Why? After everything I've done, why would you help me?" James was quiet for a moment. "Because in the past 12 hours, I've watched you handle a multi-million-dollar crisis, admit to painful truths, and take responsibility for your choices. And because when I think about our conversations, I don't remember talking to Emily Patterson or Emily Carter. I remember talking to someone curious and thoughtful and kind. Maybe those qualities transcend bank accounts." Before Emily could respond, her Patterson phone rang, the board chairman's direct line. "I have to take this," she said. "Go ahead." Emily answered. "Hello, Gerald?" Gerald Hutchins' voice was grave. "Emily, we have a situation. The board is calling an emergency meeting for this afternoon. They want to discuss your fitness to continue as CEO." Emily's blood ran cold. "Gerald, I've successfully run this company for 3 years. Your personal life became company business when you used a false identity and worked at a competitor's hotel. There are questions about judgment, about ethics, about whether you've been forthcoming with the board. I've been completely transparent about all business decisions, but not about your decision to live a double life. Emily, I'm on your side, but the board is concerned. Some members are suggesting this indicates instability. Others worry about legal implications. Were you gathering competitive intelligence?" "That's ridiculous. I worked at a budget hotel completely outside our market segment. There's no overlap, no competitive intelligence, no ethical breach." "Then come explain that to the board. In person, today, 2 p.m. Emily glanced at the window. "Gerald, I'm surrounded by reporters." "Then figure out a way. If you're not at that meeting, the board will interpret it as abdication of responsibility. And there are members who'd be happy to use this crisis to remove you from leadership. The call ended. Emily stood frozen, the weight of what she was about to lose pressing down. "They're going to take my company," she said quietly. "What?" James moved closer. "The board. They're using this as grounds to question my fitness as CEO. If I can't control the narrative, if I can't convince them this was rational..." She trailed off. "What are rational reasons? Why did you really do this?" Emily sank onto her couch. "When my father died, I inherited everything, and I realized I had no idea who I was without all of that. Every relationship was colored by wealth. Every accomplishment came with the asterisk of my last name. I needed to know if I was actually capable or just coasting on inherited advantage. And I learned I am capable. I'm good at customer service. I can solve problems. I can connect with people. I can work hard and find satisfaction in a job well done." Emily's voice strengthened. "I also learned that the people who work in our hotels are doing incredibly hard work for wages that barely cover expenses. I learned that perspective. So tell them that. Tell the board, the media, everyone. It sounds condescending. Rich girl discovers poor people work hard. Groundbreaking. That's not what you're saying." James sat beside her. "You're saying you needed to understand your employees' reality to make better decisions. You cared enough to actually do it. That's not condescending. That's leadership." A knock. James's sister Amy arrived, looking slightly frazzled but professional. "Okay," Amy said, pulling out her laptop. "I've read the article, skimmed social media. We need to get ahead of this immediately. Emily, I assume you want to maintain both your position as CEO and some privacy." "Yes."
Here's what we're doing. First, no talking to reporters today. Second, we're drafting a statement reframing this from deception to understanding the business from ground level. Third, we're preparing you for the board meeting with talking points emphasizing business justification. "What's the social media reaction?" Emily asked. Amy grimaced. "Mixed. Some think it's humble. Others think it's offensive poverty cosplay. #billionaire receptionist and #Emily Patterson exposed are trending. We need to shift the conversation." For 2 hours, Amy worked with precision. She helped Emily craft a statement acknowledging her double life while framing it as an effort to understand employees' experiences. She prepared board meeting talking points. She even coordinated with hotel security to get Emily out through a service entrance. James stayed through all of it, quietly supportive, occasionally offering regular person perspective. At 1:15 p.m., Emily stood in her apartment dressed in a designer suit, hair professionally styled, looking every inch the CEO. The transformation from Emily Carter to Emily Patterson was complete. "You look terrifying," James said with a slight smile. "Good. I need to be terrifying this afternoon." Amy packed up. "Remember, you're not apologizing for wanting to understand your business. You're explaining a strategic decision to gain first-hand operational insight. You're demonstrating innovative leadership. And if they don't buy it, then you fight. You have controlling interest. They can't actually remove you without cause, and living under an assumed name isn't cause if you weren't embezzling or committing fraud." James walked her to the door. In the hallway, he spoke quietly. "Are we going to talk about what happens after this? About us?" "Do you want there to be an us?" Emily asked, afraid of the answer. "I don't know yet, but I know I don't want to walk away without finding out." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was enough to give Emily strength as she prepared to face the board. The board meeting was supposed to be challenging. Emily expected difficult questions, skeptical members, maybe a vote of no confidence. What she didn't expect was to walk into the conference room and see Philip Worthington, her ex-fiancé, sitting at the table as the newest board member, smiling at her with cold triumph.
Emily froze in the boardroom doorway. Philip Worthington sat in the leather chair that had belonged to Marcus Chen, the board member who'd retired last month. Philip wore his signature navy suit and an expression that made Emily's stomach turn, the look of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. Emily,
Gerald Hutchins said from the head of the table, uncomfortable. "Please, sit down." Emily forced herself to walk to her seat, heels clicking against marble. Around the table sat 12 board members, some who'd served with her father, others brought in during her tenure. And now Philip, who met her eyes with barely concealed satisfaction. "Before we begin," Emily said, voice steady, "I wasn't informed we had a new board member. When was Mr. Worthington appointed?" "Last week," Gerald said. "Marcus recommended him before retiring. Given Mr. Worthington's background in luxury hospitality and his family's investments, it seemed appropriate." Translation: Philip had used his family's money to buy his way onto the board the moment an opening appeared. Emily knew with certainty he'd orchestrated this specifically to be here for her moment of vulnerability. "How convenient," Emily said coolly. "Well then, let's address why we're here. You've all read the Business Daily article." "We have," said Margaret Yates, a board member never particularly warm to Emily, "and we have serious questions about your judgment and fitness to lead this company." "I welcome those questions." "Did you or did you not work at Riverside Inn under a false identity for 3 years?" "I worked there under the name Emily Carter, yes. Carter is my middle name. I wouldn't characterize it as false so much as simplified." "Semantics," Philip interjected smoothly. "You deliberately deceived people about your identity and wealth. That's fraud." Emily turned to face him directly. "It's not fraud unless there's intent to gain something illegally. I paid taxes on my receptionist income, didn't use the position for competitive intelligence, and didn't benefit financially. I'm curious about your sudden concern for ethical behavior, Philip, given your history." Philip's jaw tightened, but he maintained his pleasant expression. "My personal history isn't on trial here. Your professional judgment is." Gerald intervened. "Emily, help us understand the business rationale. Why did you feel this was necessary?" This was her moment. Emily had rehearsed with Amy, but now she abandoned the script. These people wanted authenticity. She'd give them raw truth. "When my father died and I inherited this company, I was 26 years old. I'd been groomed for leadership, business school, mentorship, board observer status. On paper, I was prepared. In reality, I knew nothing about the actual experience of the people who make our hotels run." She stood, unable to sit still. "I'd never cleaned a hotel room. I'd never dealt with a difficult guest without the power to simply walk away. I'd never worried about making rent or choosing between fixing my car and paying groceries. How could I make decisions about wages, benefits, and working conditions when I had no framework for understanding their impact?" "So this was about assuaging guilt?" Margaret asked skeptically. "It was about becoming a better CEO. Do you know what I learned working as a receptionist? I learned that our employee turnover rate is high because we pay minimum wage for jobs requiring extraordinary emotional labor. I learned that our efficiency improvements often mean giving one person the work of 2. I learned that the staff who interact most with guests are the least valued and lowest paid, despite being the face of our brand." Emily pulled out her tablet. "Since taking over, I've implemented 12 policy changes based on first-hand experience. We raised starting wages 18% across all properties. We improved health benefits and added mental health coverage. We created clear promotion pathways for hourly employees. We reduced required overtime and hired additional staff." "Those changes cost us $47 million annually," Thomas pointed out. "They also decreased turnover by 23%, increased customer satisfaction by 15%, and improved our reputation as an employer. We're now the most sought-after hotel employer in 7 of our markets. That has value beyond quarterly reports." "Or," Philip said smoothly, "you could have conducted focus groups or employee surveys like every other CEO. You didn't need to lie for 3 years." "You're right. I didn't need to. I chose to. Because I wanted the truth, not the sanitized version people tell the boss. When employees know they're talking to the CEO, they edit themselves. I needed to hear what they actually thought, what they actually experienced."
That's rationalization for deception, Margaret said. Maybe. Or maybe it's the most honest thing I've done. Because here's what I realized. I'm not special. The only difference between me and Emily Carter, the receptionist, is the family I was born into. Every receptionist, housekeeper, maintenance worker, they're not supporting characters in my story. They're heroes of their own stories, working incredibly hard, often for far less respect and compensation than they deserve. The room was silent. Board members exchanged glances, some skeptical, some considering. Then Philip spoke, voice cutting. Moving speech, Emily, but let's be honest about what this really was. You were running away from responsibility, from the pressure of being Emily Patterson. You were hiding. And you would know all about hiding, wouldn't you, Philip? Hiding your contempt behind a fake engagement, hiding your real motivations behind romantic gestures. At least I was honest about my dishonesty. I knew I was living under a different name. You convinced me your love was real when you were just marrying a bank account. Philip's pleasant mask slipped, revealing anger. Personal attacks won't help your case. Neither will personal vendettas. Why are you really here, Philip? Did you buy your way onto this board just to watch me fail? I'm here because I have legitimate concerns about leadership that makes impulsive, irrational decisions without board consultation. Gerald cleared his throat. Emily, let's keep this professional. You haven't addressed the ethics of deceiving your coworkers and hotel management. Emily took a breath, recentering. You're right, that's the part I struggle with most. I made friends under false pretenses. They invited me into their lives believing I was someone like them. When they learn the truth through news articles, they'll feel betrayed. That's on me. I own that. So you admit it was wrong, Margaret pressed. I admit it had costs I didn't fully consider, but I don't admit it was wrong overall. The insights I gained, the perspective I developed, the policy changes I implemented, those have improved thousands of lives. If the cost is that some people are angry with me, I accept that. I'd rather be a CEO who makes unpopular choices that benefit employees than one who makes comfortable choices that maintain the status quo. Thomas spoke up. These policy changes, the wage increases, benefit improvements, they've significantly impacted profit margins. By 3.2%, Emily corrected, we're still highly profitable, just slightly less profitable in exchange for being a better employer and a more sustainable business.
Shareholders might disagree. Shareholders value stability and long-term growth. High turnover and poor morale cost more in the long run than better wages. I can provide detailed analysis. We've seen your analysis, Margaret interrupted. What we haven't seen is acknowledgement that your choices have created a PR crisis. The company is trending on social media. We have journalists calling, shareholders asking questions, which is why I've prepared a comprehensive communication strategy. Emily distributed documents Amy had helped create. We're reframing the narrative from billionaire playing pretend to CEO committed to understanding the business from every angle. We're highlighting policy improvements that resulted. We're being transparent while emphasizing positive outcomes. She continued. We're also announcing a new initiative, an executive shadow program, where senior leadership will spend time working in entry-level positions at our properties, not undercover, transparently, learning, listening, understanding. We're turning my controversial choice into a company-wide commitment to employee perspective. Several board members reviewed the materials thoughtfully, but Philip wasn't finished. This is all very polished, he said, but it doesn't address the fundamental issue. Emily, you've demonstrated that when faced with pressure, your instinct is to run and hide rather than confront problems directly. What happens the next time you face a crisis? Should we expect you to disappear again? I didn't run away. I made a deliberate choice to gain perspective that would make me a better leader. And it worked. Did it? Because you're now facing the biggest crisis of your tenure, entirely of your own making. The crisis isn't my double life. The crisis is that people like you can't imagine why someone with wealth would choose to live without it temporarily. The crisis is that we've created a society where class boundaries are so rigid that crossing them, even temporarily, even for education, is seen as transgressive.
Don't turn this into a political statement, Margaret said dismissively. You lied. That's the issue. Emily looked around the table, seeing doubt on most faces. Only Gerald looked sympathetic. She was losing this fight. Then her phone buzzed with a text from James. Remember what you told me. You wanted to know if you were capable without the advantages. You are. Don't let them take that away. Emily felt something shift inside her. She'd spent 3 years trying to prove she was more than her name and money. Now she needed to prove it to the people who'd known her the longest. You want to know if I'm fit to lead this company? Emily said, voice strong and clear. Here's what I've accomplished in 3 years as CEO. Revenue up 22%. Employee satisfaction up 34%. Customer loyalty at all-time highs. Market share increased in every segment. Successful acquisitions, including today's Meadowbrook deal. 0 major scandals or lawsuits. Innovation in sustainability and community engagement that's won industry awards. She placed both hands on the table, leaning forward. What you're actually questioning isn't my performance. It's whether you're comfortable with the CEO who doesn't conform to expectations, who makes unconventional choices, who prioritizes people over profit margins. That's not, let me finish, Emily interrupted. I understand if the board is uncomfortable with my methods. I understand if you'd prefer someone more traditional, more predictable. But before you make decisions about my fitness, ask yourselves, what has this company become under my leadership? Are we better? Are we positioned for sustainable growth? Are we treating our people well? The room was silent. Emily met each board member's eyes in turn. And if your answer is yes, if you acknowledge that by any objective measure I've been successful, then ask whether you're rejecting me because of actual performance issues or because you're uncomfortable with who I am and how I lead. Gerald cleared his throat. Emily, I think we need to discuss this privately. Could you step outside? Emily nodded, gathered her materials, and walked out with her head high. As the door closed, she heard the eruption of voices, some supportive, some angry, all loud. In the executive hallway, Emily leaned against the wall and allowed herself one moment of weakness. Her hands shook. Her heart pounded. 3 years of work could disappear because she dared to step outside prescribed boundaries. Her phone buzzed. James. How did it go? Emily typed, Don't know yet. They're deliberating. Might lose everything. Not everything. You still have you. The word steadied her. Whatever happened, she was still the person she'd discovered herself to be. Emily Patterson and Emily Carter weren't separate. They were both her, both real, both valid. 20 minutes passed like hours. Emily paced, checked her phone compulsively, ran through contingency plans. She had controlling interest. They couldn't fire her without cause, but they could make her tenure impossible, erode her authority, turn every decision into a battle. The boardroom door opened. Gerald emerged, expression unreadable. Emily, we're ready for you. She walked back in on legs steadier than they had any right to be. Board members sat with various emotions on their faces, sympathy, disapproval, careful neutrality. Gerald remained standing. Emily, we've discussed your situation at length. This was not unanimous, and I want to be clear that there are members with serious concerns about your judgment. Emily's heart sank. However, Gerald continued, the majority recognizes that by every measurable metric, Patterson Hotels has thrived under your leadership. While we don't necessarily approve of your methods, we cannot deny your results. Emily felt the tiniest flicker of hope. Therefore, the board has decided to not pursue any action regarding your position as CEO at this time. You will continue with our full support, conditional on several requirements. What requirements? Margaret spoke briskly. First, the double life ends immediately. No more false identities. Second, you'll implement the executive shadow program you proposed. Third, you'll work with our communications team to manage this PR situation transparently. I agree to all of those. And fourth, Philip added with an edge, you'll provide quarterly reports to the board addressing any unconventional business decisions before implementing them. No more surprises. He met his eyes. This was his power play. Inserting himself as an obstacle, but she'd won the larger battle.
She could navigate around Philip. Agreed. Then we're settled. Emily, I hope you understand how seriously we take governance and transparency. This was close. I understand. Thank you.
As board members filed out, Philip paused beside Emily. "Don't think this is over," he said quietly. "You may have survived today, but I'm watching. One more mistake and I'll make sure you're removed." "Then I'll make sure not to make mistakes," Emily replied calmly. "Unlike you, I actually care about this company beyond what it does for my ego." Philip's expression darkened, but he left without another word. Emily stood alone in the boardroom, the weight settling over her. She'd survived. Barely, but she'd survived. Her phone rang. Amy Morrison. "I just got a call from Business Daily," Amy said. "They want a follow-up interview. I think we should do it. Controlled, on your terms. Show you're not hiding." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll prepare you tonight. But Emily, this needs to be perfect. Vulnerable, but confident. Apologetic, but not weak. Can you do that?" Emily thought about the past 24 hours. The exposure, James, the board meeting. She'd been more vulnerable than ever in her public life. "Yes, I can do that." The interview could save her reputation or destroy what remained of it. But as Emily prepared to face the cameras, she realized the real question wasn't whether she could convince the public. It was whether she could finally convince herself that Emily Patterson and Emily Carter could exist as one person.
The next morning, Emily sat across from Jennifer Martinez in a neutral conference room. Jennifer was seasoned, intelligent, with a reputation for fairness, but also for asking uncomfortable questions. Amy had coached Emily for 3 hours. Don't over-explain. Don't apologize for who you are. Own your choices and explain your reasoning. Let people decide what they think. Now, with cameras rolling, Emily felt surprisingly calm. She'd spent 3 years hiding. It was time to stop. "Miss Patterson," Jennifer began, "let's start with the basic question. Why did you do this?" Emily took a breath. "I inherited a company and fortune at 26. I'd been raised in wealth, educated in privilege, surrounded by people who treated me differently because of my last name. I realized I had no idea who I was without all of that. More importantly, I had no idea what life was actually like for the thousands of people who work for my company." "You could have shadowed employees, conducted research, held town halls," Jennifer pointed out. "Why the deception?" "Because people tell the boss what they think the boss wants to hear. I needed the truth, the unfiltered reality of working for minimum wage, budgeting every dollar, facing customers who don't see you as a person, but as a service provider. I couldn't get that truth as Emily Patterson, CEO. I could only get it as Emily Carter, receptionist." Some have called your actions offensive, a billionaire playing at poverty while real people struggle. "I understand that criticism," Emily acknowledged. "And they're right that I always had a safety net, that my struggles were optional in ways theirs aren't. I can't defend that privilege, but I can say that what I learned changed me and changed my company in ways that have materially improved thousands of lives." She showed Jennifer the data. Wage increases, benefit improvements, turnover reduction, satisfaction scores. These changes happened because I understood, viscerally, what our employees needed, not from reports, but from living it. Jennifer studied the numbers. "You deceived people, your coworkers, managers, guests. How do you justify that?" "I don't fully. I made friends who thought I was someone like them, and when the truth came out, those feelings became complicated by questions of authenticity and inequality. We're still figuring out what happens next." "Do you think a relationship between a billionaire and someone of ordinary means can work?" "I think any relationship requires honesty, respect, and willingness to navigate differences. The financial gap between us is real and creates unique challenges. But I'd rather face those challenges with someone who sees me as a person than avoid them with someone who only sees my bank account." Jennifer made a note. "Your board met yesterday. Can you discuss what happened?"
The board expressed concerns about my judgment, which I understand. They also recognized that Patterson Hotels has performed well under my leadership. We reached an agreement that I'd continue as CEO while implementing more transparent communication and expanding employee perspective initiatives. There's a new board member, Philip Worthington, your ex-fiancé. Some speculate he joined specifically to challenge your leadership. Emily smiled slightly. Philip's entitled to his opinions about governance. I'm confident my performance will speak for itself. One last question, Jennifer said. If you could go back 3 years, knowing how this would end, would you still do it? Emily didn't hesitate. Yes, because I'm a better person now than I was then. I understand more, care more, see more. And Patterson Hotels is a better company. If the price for that is public scrutiny and some damaged relationships, I accept that price. The interview lasted another 30 minutes, covering everything from Emily's childhood to her vision for the company. When it ended, Emily felt wrung out, but lighter. The secrets were out. The truth was visible. There was nowhere left to hide. Amy reviewed the footage and nodded with satisfaction. That was good. Really good. You came across as human, thoughtful, imperfect, but sincere. I think this will help. The article ran 2 days later with the headline, Emily Patterson on her double life. I needed to understand the truth. The response was mixed, as expected. Some praised Emily's commitment, others remained critical. Social media debated endlessly about wealth, privilege, and ethics. But slowly, the narrative shifted. Former Patterson Hotels employees started sharing stories about the policy changes Emily had implemented, the raises, benefit, improved conditions. Several wrote that while Emily wished Emily had been honest from the start, they appreciated that Emily had actually listened to what employees needed. Marcus, her former Riverside coworker, posted a video that went viral. Yeah, I'm mad she lied, but Emily was a good coworker. She showed up, did her job, helped when things got crazy. She wasn't pretending to work, she actually worked. And if her undercover boss thing means other billionaires might actually try to understand what regular people deal with, then maybe something good came of it. Emily watched the video 3 times, tears streaming. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was understanding. And right now, that meant everything.
Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.